Hi, good morning and good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the ProPack Asia webinar series focusing on the processing industry. And for the today topic, it will be technology and innovation opportunities for Asian food manufacturing. My name is June Chutimata Tong. I am the Assistant Buyer Development Manager here at Informa Markets in Bangkok, Thailand. I will be one of your moderators for today. So before we start, let me explain how to interact with us, the organizer, and the other participant during the presentation. So if you have any question to the speakers, you can write in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. Also, for any organizational or technical question, you can write to the team at ProPack Asia using the chat box. Please note that the PDF of the presentation will also be shared via email upon speaker's approval. The webinar will be recorded and will post it on the ProPack Asia website. Your certificate of participation will be sent out within 5 working days after you have completed the webinar survey. So for today's session, we have 5 speakers. We will beginning with Mr. Luke Tay. He is also our international knowledge partner for ProPack Asia and founder of Cornucopia Futurescape for the topic overview of key manufacturing trends and case example. So without further ado, I would like to invite Mr. Luke Tay to start the session. And please welcome Luke. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, June. And I would say that it's my honor to be the founder of Cornucopia Futurescapes, which is also the knowledge partner of ProPack Asia. And I'm very proud to be associated and very honored also with one of Asia's leading packaging and food processing and manufacturing shows held every year in Bangkok in June. More on that later. And really, when we put together this webinar, we wanted to give you a taste of some of the emerging issues and the emerging solutions that we as an Asian food sector, whether we come on the buy side, the sell side, or as a regulator and academic, another part of the sprawling, vibrant food system that should look out for and what can we contribute towards in terms of the preferred future. So let me bring you through some of my own perspectives on where we stand as a sector and where we may be heading. So first, let's look at some numbers. The Asian food market is $5 trillion US, $5 trillion US worth in terms of revenue terms for this year, as projected by Statista. And looking ahead over the next few years, there's quite a promising CAGR growth of something close to 7%. And this constitutes 5 trillion, about half of the global value being generated in the food sector. And of this, 5% so far are through online sales transactions, a very low proportion that we can expect will really increase a lot over time. So there's the upside potential of digitalization. But really, the food business is about food security first and foremost. Food security at the right price, where food is available in the right type, at the right price, where we need it to be, not just that there's enough being produced. And really, if you look at the fundamentals, by value, also 20% of the Asian food market is in cereals and staples, reminding us that our job, first and foremost, is a very momentous one of keeping people fed. And how do we do that? You know, there's a big market size, big growth potential, but also in these somewhat turbulent economic times, there's a need for more investment. Temasek PwC Rabobank study in recent years identified that $800 billion in additional investment is needed across the region over the next several years in order to produce food in the quantity and quality that is required of us. And so, as an overall theme, I would suggest to you that food security is the big challenge moving ahead. It's always been big business, but as food security comes under pressure, for instance, due to challenges in international, interregional relations, and also really due to climate change that the world hasn't gotten under control. It will also be a big policy issue. Will governments be getting more involved in regulation or even intervention in food markets, in food manufacturing, in order to make sure that people are fed? And so, if we look ahead, I think it's a question of how, as an industry, do we achieve smart growth amid rising constraints? And how do we be resilient to create value for ourselves and all our stakeholders? So let me bring you through some thoughts on that. We know there's been challenges in terms of new food innovations over the years. For instance, we talk about cultured meat, lab-grown meat, and we've had an announcement that Eat Just, that had been planning production and doing production in Singapore, had paused its operations doing a review. But at the same time, in other markets like Thailand, I think Aleph Farms is moving ahead with that innovation. So that's where this question of is it an S curve of innovation, or is it the Gartner hype cycle? Do we just hype new technologies and solutions, and there's great promise, great investor interest, but inevitably a trial of disillusionment? So is this hype cycle, or is it really an S curve, early adoption, where there's a struggle, then a big growth spurt, but then maturity and a new window of innovation? I really think it's both. There's the marketing front, there's the pitch front, but there's also the substance. So overall, for food technology and innovation in Asia and around the world, we've been moving from S curve to S curve. And what is the next step? You could argue that it is alternate protein as one of the main topics. We'll talk more about that. But what else? For the next breakthrough in innovation. Digitalization. Here's a very busy screen. It's an example of how in Singapore, where I come from, different government agencies are segmenting and looking at interventions and support and a roadmap to the future for digitalization of the food industry from farm to fork. This is certainly one area that, especially in a region heavy with mom and pop and generational MSMEs, but also generational transition from the baby boomer generation to maybe more educated, more tech savvy, new generations of business owners. It's a big opportunity for more digitalization. Price volatility and price increase. I think we're in the era of high inflation, and this is just maybe an extraordinary example from the world cocoa price right now. But people, maybe with all the stress to mental health and everything else, also will need that boost from chocolate. But will it be resilient? Another thing, due to different struggles and issues in the world, could there be more challenges in terms of boycotts as well of brands based on their host market affiliation? Tech breakthroughs, beyond cultured meat that we talk about, one very interesting area is precision fermentation. And Solein, from Solar Foods, is one exciting example, recently licensed for sale in Singapore, where literally from thin air, but taking energy and bringing through a bacterial growth media, you can produce nutrient powder. Insects, another example. So let me string all this together as I close my remarks, really talking about what is the advanced food manufacturing paradigm that we can look at in the future. There are many tiles here. I've given you many examples already. So this, I think, putting together things, certainly looking at equipment and processes. So you've got dynamic vendors like Bueller or Tetra Pak that do that. New flavors and fragrances from the likes of Givaudan, for example, or Ajinomoto, novel foods that we'll discuss quite a lot. One big theme we'll also discuss in the panel is what's next for ESG, and also really breaking it down. It's even things like maximizing circularity or maximizing not just energy, but also water efficiency, because water security is a big challenge moving ahead. But on more exciting frontiers for food manufacturing, what about free from food, be it due to allergy or due to expanding demographics of religious belief, like the halal market, 1 billion strong right now. This will be a big driver for more precision, more quality, more provable provenance type of foods, especially as we go into the novel food space. So all these trends interact with each other. And one question is, will the future of food production be more centralized or decentralized, or even a little bit of both? And will we source from urban farming, smart urban and bioregionalized food sheds, more of the feedstock, rather than importing it from further away? So let me leave you with some thoughts that we can pick up later on some things that are uncertainties that will shape the future of food manufacturing and processing. Will there be more regionalism at ASEAN or expanded levels in terms of food value chains? Where will we move, not just in alt protein, but beyond proteins? What about the blue economy, talking about different solutions for sourcing and manufacturing food that have to do with the sea and with aquaculture, and alternatives to unsustainable capture fisheries? How about the highly processed future of food? Does it have a place? Is this inherently problematic, or does it really depend? And one last one to tee up to you is, we move forward in ESG, in the climate emergency, what might carbon mandates and carbon markets have a role to play as well? So with that, thank you so much for your attention, and let me hand you over to our next speaker. Our next speaker is Mr. Justin Ng. He's the Sustainability Manager at Food Industry Asia, and he will be talking to us about food manufacturer regulatory developments, especially in the ESG sphere. So over to you, Justin, and I'll be introducing each speaker as we go along. Thank you.
Thank you, Luke, for the interesting presentation and also the overview of the whole Asian market. I think when we talk about sustainability, there's many fronts that we need to consider. And I would just like to say good morning and good afternoon to everyone, wherever you may be attending this webinar from. My name is Justin, and I work for a trade organization called Food Industry Asia. So as you can see right over here, we work with many of the FMCG companies that you might be familiar with. And my role here at FIA is where I manage the sustainability focus pillar. And right now, the current focus is very much on the issue and management of packaging waste, mainly due to the types of products and packagings that many of our member companies actually produce. And also, if you were to know also the developments concerning the first legally binding plastic treaty, which is set to be finalized by the end of 2024. So today I was actually invited by Luke to provide sharing the activities and matters related to food manufacturing, and also the broader sustainability agenda. And so while the work I involved in the association largely revolves around policies that might impact the packaging waste, I hope to still give everyone a better idea of some of the recent developments concerning global policy progresses. And if any of you were to have any more technical questions, I'll be happy to take them separately offline. Yeah, I would like to begin firstly by starting my presentation to share more about what a sustainable food system looks like. So in recent times, I think we see increased linkages between the associations of food loss and waste and that of climate change, a topic that has been discussed more and more strongly than ever. And on a global scale, I think we all have a general idea that total food loss and waste accounts for about 1/3 of production. However, if we dive deeper, if you can take a look at the diagram on the left over here, we can see that actually food loss itself contributes to around 64%. And food loss is usually associated with those along the stages of the supply chain, and with food wastage contributing to 46%. So food wastage is largely due to things like consumer purchasing and also the consumption behavior. And relatedly, food loss and waste itself also contributes to about 7 to 10% of greenhouse gases emission. So we see here that actually, food loss and waste is quite a big part when we want to talk about climate change and even sustainability in itself. And according to the FAO, sustainable food system is essentially a system where it's sustainable economically and also socially, and one that delivers food security and nutrition to the different markets. With this, we see that because of all this growing need for more environmentally friendly product and also socially responsible food production, I think the whole ecosystem has actually witnessed a surge in activity and also corporate collaboration. Things like plant-based and alternative proteins, like what Lip has mentioned earlier on. Even things like food waste reduction, where industrial food waste generators need to actually segregate their food waste accordingly. And also in Singapore, in the country where I am right now, it's actually the first country which have permitted cultivated meat, for instance. But that being said, I think there are varieties of parameters that pose a challenge towards attaining this whole sustainable food system. You can see over here at the bottom, I highlighted cost, consumer demand, finance, and lastly, policy and regulations, which are all complex in its own nature. If we talk about costs, things like sustainable farming and organic farm, they require very heavy capital investments at the upfront, which can be a barrier. Consumer demand, as much as consumers demand for more sustainable products, sometimes it may be hard to be able to balance the scale of economics when we talk about that. And also in terms of finance, the availability of diverse funding, grants and loans might not be sufficient in some of the markets. And moving on, just a snapshot of what happened at 28 just last year. For the longest time, the issue on food systems on climate has been left out of the whole agenda. But just recently in this COP28 meeting, Declaration of Sustainable Agriculture was actually signed by more than 130 countries. And also besides that, the FAO released a roadmap that actually acknowledged sustainable agriculture as part of climate change. And while this roadmap is actually not legal binding at this point in time, it gives countries a sense of direction on how to move forward when we talk about integrating food systems in their climate goals. And it's also a significant step in the right direction. And also finally in Singapore, the country also managed to secure a deal with Papua New Guinea to sell emission reductions for credits, which can be bought by Singapore companies as forms of carbon credits. But while so space of the carbon trading and market is being developed, right, we still continue to see large criticism for the lack of credibility towards the environmental impact when we talk about how the whole carbon market is like. And this is also largely due to the differing opinions between the region in EU and also US over the guidelines of how carbon market should work, should be looked at. And in the next slide here, it gives you an overview of the whole global supply chain. I think over the years, we see that the supply chain has pivoted towards Asia countries, where more and more of the Asian countries are actually exporting towards the EU. And also, as for Southeast Asia countries that continue to attract businesses due to the attractive labor cost. But along with this, we see a growing recognition of the reduction of carbon emissions, where about 8 to 10 ASEAN member states have already pledged to the net zero ambitions. And if you can see on the right here, there are two, I would say, jargons in a sense, carbon neutral and net zero, to which many people, I believe, have some confusion. So I just want to provide probably a little more clarity on what carbon neutrality is. So essentially, carbon neutral is actually directed to carbon itself. And one can actually buy carbon credits to offset it, but it does not count as the actual part of the reduction. Whereas for net zero, it applies to all forms of greenhouse gases emission, and it actually requires 90% of reduction. And only offset can only be used after all the reduction methods are being used for this. And because of the theme of decarbonization, governments in the region have started to explore different forms of alternatives to embrace greener supply chains. And before I move on to the next, I think going back to the figure over here, it's evident that many of the Asian countries continue to export to the EU, but this has been a growing cause of concern because of the developments in the EU here. So I think what I want to highlight in this slide is some of the developments in the EU and how it might impact the Asia businesses. First of which is that of the EU carbon border adjustment mechanism, which is essentially a tax policy to reduce carbon emissions by putting an extra tax on certain selected goods like aluminum, iron, and steel. And secondly is that of EU deforestation law, where companies producing palm oil, for instance, will need to actually do a traceability check to verify that okay, the plot of land that they use have not been engaged with deforestation. So all this implicates products along the supply chain. For instance, chocolate. I think many of us might be aware of the increased chocolate price because of the lack of cocoa due to dry weather conditions. So coupled with this EU deforestation law, we do foresee that there are potentially more complications that may come in the pipeline. And thirdly, the EU Packaging and Packaging Waste Directive, which is one of the largest regulations over there dealing with packaging waste, which will set out clear targets for the minimum use of things like recycled content and also mandatory waste reduction. And lastly, I think ESG has been streaming into finance as well. Things like green financing, sustainability bonds, and it's clear that there's an increased pressure for all companies to actually integrate ESG as part of their whole ecosystem. Yep. So moving on in this aspect would be that of the ASEAN and also probably closer to ASEAN and Singapore, where the ASEAN green taxonomy was actually released last year. This is more to provide details on the clear guidance for businesses and investors towards capital for green activities. So essentially, actually introduce a like system based on the environmental impact of activity in green, amber, and red. And in Singapore, I think Singapore is one of the countries that ASEAN countries to launch the carbon tax. And starting this year, there will be an increase to the tax that is being paid for per ton of carbon being emitted on carbon intensive industries. And relatedly, a new grant was actually released by the ADB and Enterprise of Singapore, I think a couple of weeks back, to help the SME to defray their costs for sustainability reporting. So I think what we can highlight here is it's really the increasing shift towards ESG today and all of the increasing implications as well when we see how developments in the EU might actually trickle down to the ASEAN region. And speaking of decarbonization, then I think this is a very big topic of and how do we then harness decarbonization, like with the increased pledges. And we foresee that actually one of the first few steps towards this whole step of decarbonization, firstly, is for companies to start doing their recording in terms of the collection of data. By doing this, you set the boundaries in terms of establishing what is S1, S2, and S3 emissions, mainly S1 as direct emissions from sources, S2 indirect, and also S3 indirect emissions from the value chain, which tend to take up 70 to 80% of all emissions. And after the collection of data process will be done for business to really identify and measure the carbon footprint, because this will be able to give a snapshot on, okay, how much is my company actually producing when we talk about emissions. And in short, what we want to highlight here is that actually businesses can develop an implementation plan when weighing against the type of solutions against emissions that can reduce emissions as well as the costs involved. And before I wrap up, I think I just wanted to highlight one of the key topics that has been discussed is that of greenwashing. I think there's a lot of news lately regarding this aspect on greenwashing, when many brand owners, large or small enterprises, tend to be at the risk of making claims which might lead to unintentional greenwashing. So just to highlight on the on the right-hand side of this slide here, we can see that actually, in fact, that not all bioplastics are biodegradable. And in the EU, they are going to start banning the use of general sustainability claims, you can see over the right-hand side. And while in the Asian region where such policies might be considered more nascent in the EU, we do see that there's a increase of the release of guidelines associated to such green claims. So I think this is a point that we want to continue to highlight and really ensure that actually when claims are being placed on a product and packaging, that they have to be carefully considered. And just to wrap up my presentation today on the whole sustainability, the broad sustainability piece is that sustainability risks and opportunities are growing in significance, and there's no better time to start integrating or at least facilitate this transition. And double materiality is another concept that it's being talked about more. So more beyond just the outside in approach, but also the inside out approach on how activities may impact the society. And thirdly, clear communication and transparency when we talk about the claims being placed on the products, even as it's more and more towards the direction of sustainable. And lastly, definitely policies, well-designed policies would have a very huge significant impact to the value chain, to which at Food Industry Asia, we strive to help the food businesses to really strengthen the advocacy fronts on different levels. With that, I just want to thank everyone for your attention, and I will hand back the time to Luke to introduce our next distinguished speaker. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you very much, Justin, for Food Industry Asia's perspective on this very crucial topic that affects all of us. And I think it's a great bridge, and there's so much more that we can talk about in terms of greenwashing, in terms of firms, and how even through their manufacturing processes and choices, will need to be mindful of scope 1 and 2 and 3 and be more sustainable. And I think that's a great bridge also to introduce the next speaker. He is Professor Kristiani Jayakumar Henry, or Prof. Jaya, as I call him. I've known him for several years, really respect his body of work. He is Senior Advisor at Singapore's Institute for Food Biotechnology and Innovation. And he'll be talking to us about new product development, and we talk about the environment. So let's talk about people-centered and wellness outcomes from new product development. So over to you, Professor. Invite you to share your slides and your thoughts.
Thank you very much. Can you guys hear me? Thank you. So a very big thanks to the organizers and Luke for the introduction, and good afternoon, good morning to all of you around the world listening to this webinar. So my task this afternoon is to look at the impact of new food product development within the context of the broader theme of this webinar. And I am speaking to you from Singapore, and I'm a researcher and a practitioner of food technology and nutrition, and I work within a very large institution called A*STAR, and that's what my current occupation is. So in order to provide some context, I want to make a rhetorical statement, which is that we are living in the midst of a global food and health paradox, where one half of the world is overweight and obese, and the other half is totally undernourished. So we have North America and Europe broadly encountered overweight and obesity, and parts of Africa, Latin America, and parts of Asia having undernutrition. But the particular paradox is that in Asia, where we are currently surrounded, we have the double burden of known overnutrition and undernutrition, which I think is sometimes forgotten. And I want to posit that the irony is that both overnutrition and undernutrition are predicated on the food that we consume. And this is where the role of food technology and food manufacturing in Asia is going to play a pivotal role, because I think we simply cannot, in the 21st century and beyond, ignore the paradigm of overnutrition and undernutrition plaguing our region. So the thesis of my presentation is to say that food will become the new medicine, and how can the food companies and the food manufacturers of the region play on that narrative? Because there is a stroke of irony, because for over 5,000 years, Asia was the epicenter of food and medicine being interconnected. Both Chinese and Indian pharmacopoeia have made no distinction between food as medicine and medicine as food. But now we have a renaissance of interest that is based on what I call evidence-based science. So I think the first point I'd like to make is that we're going to see a sea change of food not being just an entity of enjoyment, but also a potential entity of health and well-being. So it's also hard to imagine that modern food technology as we know it today in terms of the food manufacturing paradigm is little more than 150 years old. It's a blink of an eye in our history. But as we all know in this audience, that food technology plays a central role in transforming agricultural products, animal and marine products, and more recently on fungal and microbial products, which we'll hear a speaker talk about, that gives us safe food, shelf-stable food, sustainable food, highly palatable food. And I think until a few years ago, much of the connection between food technology and processing was based on these four paradigms: food safety, shelf stability, sustainability, and palatability. But in the 21st century and beyond, ladies and gentlemen, nutrition is going to play a central role. And if you look at all the multinational companies that you can recall from the West, nutrition has now become a central theme and tenet of their food production. So food for health and food for wealth will become a very, very important point. Now, the reason why in Asia we need to become much more concerned about nutrition and food is because, sadly, Asia is the epicenter of type 2 diabetes, hypertension, heart disease, and many of the chronic diseases that you're familiar with that we historically thought was the plague of the Western world. It ain't true anymore. Asia is the epicenter. So we now have a very unique opportunity as a food industry platform in this region to use the matrimony of food technology with good nutrition, which in turn allows us to eat palatable foods, but surprise, but also give us a healthy longevity and happy life. And that paradigm shift is what we need to exploit and explore in the future. So just to put it in context, Asia, including Thailand, we are all major exporters of fruits, vegetables, seafoods, and tubers. But I want to posit that we now need to move up the value chain, where with the application of food processing and basic principles of nutrition, we can now start making what we call functional foods, foods that have a highly delectable, palatable entity, but also carry with it a evidence-based health outcome. And I think this is going to be a very important revolution in our region. So with our incredible plant taxonomy, biodiversity abound in this region, both for plants, animals, and marine sources, we now need to extract and isolate phytochemicals and many other compounds that we know that are available in our taxonomy to make healthy, nutritious foods. And this, ladies and gentlemen, will form a new paradigm shift in the development of food sector in this region that would have a global impact. Just to give you 3 examples, we know that many of the plants contain phytochemicals, and some of these phytochemicals have a significant effect on reducing a glucose response or reducing the glycemic response of food. And we now know that for pre-diabetics and diabetics, we need foods that lower the glucose response. Second example is that many of the spices that we consume have got many novel compounds that are well known to affect brain health, gut health, and one example that comes to mind is curcumin from turmeric. And the last example, which is the most exciting one, is that we now know that there are certain dipeptides in fish and marine products that can lower blood pressure. So look at the amazing tapestry of opportunities that we have. Food that we grow and we produce for palatable entities now has got a second layer of paradigm, which is health attributes. And I think this is going to transform our industry and our region. The second point I wanted to share with you is this whole question of valorization, circular economy, and sustainability. With my simple example of mango, very familiar to us. Globally, we produce about 55 or 56 million metric tons of mango, and 40% of the weight of the mango is the seed, and that's about 22.5 million metric tons. And the seed of the mango has got 20% oil. Why is oil going to be important? Is because oil is the most expensive of the 3 macronutrients, proteins, fats, and carbohydrates that are valuable resource for our food production. So here's something that is quite amazing. The fatty acid composition of the mango seed is roughly the same as your eloquent olive oil, rich in oleic acid. So we have here a seed that's thrown asunder that can be of enormous valorization attributes. What about the other seeds that throw away? Mangosteen, rambutan, many stone fruits that we consume. And my second example is how we are throwing away a rich source of carbohydrate because we cannot continue to be sustainable on consuming rice alone as a staple. And it turns out that jack seed has got a very rich carbohydrate that we can transform into buns and cookies and even make it into rice grains. So I just want to give you the flavor of how we can valorize things that we throw away in this circular economy paradigm, but also in terms of the sustainability. And I want to now move on to something which I think is very close to my heart, which I think is that we in this region are surrounded by a cacophony of nearly 1 billion people that are undernourished in the world at large. Half of them live in this world, in this region of Asia. So how can we develop low-cost, high nutritive value foods for our people in this region, but also for the world? As far as I'm concerned, no multinational company is understanding the importance of producing foods for the base of the pyramid, which are 3.2 billion people that go hungry, 1 billion people, because of inadequate, low-cost food that have got high nutritive value. So they posit to us as the industry partners, how can we from our region become the global players of looking at this area of developing low-cost, high nutritive value foods with the use of food technology and the underexploited plant sources that surround our region in a way that I think will be enormously valuable. So ladies and gentlemen, my posit is 3 simple ideas. The first is that the revolution that we can harness and lead is the connection between food and health and the production of functional foods. The second is how do we valorize foods that we're throwing away and exploring aspects of what we call underexploited plants, which I think are enormous roles that our food companies can play. And also, just to give you 2 taglines, can we make foods that are wealth creators but also health creators, and also to end up by saying, can we as a community not only give value to what we do, apart from only thinking of valorization of our industry? Thank you very much.
So thank you very much, Prof. Jaya, for that, I think, powerful meditation on the very key points about how we have a more people-centered food system moving forward, unlocking Asia's awesome taxonomy of natural endowments, and also embracing a circular economy, and to not forget the least and less fortunate among the big Asian demographic. So I think with this call to action, I think it's perfect now to go to Dr. Lalana Thirasunkoch, Director of Innovation and Business Development at the Premier Group of Companies, Thailand. And she will be talking about catching the wave in terms of how Thai food manufacturers are responding to these trends and leveraging on these technologies. So Dr. Lalana, over to you, please.
Okay, so thank you, Luke, for the introduction. And Professor Christiani, your presentation is a perfect introduction to mine, because we are very in line with the contents that we will be projecting to the audience. So good evening and good afternoon, good morning to everyone listening in this webinar. So I'd like to introduce myself. So I have a food science background, but I have a PhD in innovation management here from Chulalongkorn University in Thailand. And I'm currently the Director of Innovation and Business Development at Premier Group of Companies. So before we talk about future food, let's talk about the global issues that we are facing. So by year 2050, we will have more than 10 billion people globally. And how do we feed that growing amount of people, in the world population? We are already having troubles with it now. So with the limited resources and also the same resources available and lessening as time goes by, we really need technology in order to produce that amount of food that is going to be needed. And because, we are putting a lot of stress, a lot of challenges in our food production, we will create huge negative impacts on the environment, which will lead to climate change. And we are already facing that situation of climate change now. All of a sudden, the climate becomes very hot, and that also will have impacts on, our world staple food, for example, wheat and rice, so that will have an effect on food security in the future. And also with the aging population, there will be 22% of the world population being 60 years and over by year 2050. And also the modern lifestyle that we are leading today, it has contributed to the occurrence of NCDs, and 41 million people are killed due to NCDs each year. So the role of future food must respond to three main global challenges: that's sustainability and safety, food accessibility, and also population health. So with the consumer behavior changing, people are looking for sustainable future. And so they are looking for ways to ease the guilt of consumption. For example, biodiverse dining, so eating diversity of plants and animals, and also contributing to a healthy and varied diet. food waste rescue, so using byproducts in the production of food, and also plant-based eating, so having alternative proteins instead of meat. And for the feel-good consumers, most consumers want sustainable products and packaging because they just feel good when they purchase these sustainable products. And consumers are also choosing products with environmentally friendly packaging as well. So for example, in Thailand, we have a water brand, and the bottle is actually thinner than other brands. So people choose that because they feel that they're using less plastic. And also with the changing lifestyle, especially since COVID pandemic, people are working from home more, and that's actually impacted the food and beverage behavior, I think, globally. So with the working from home, people are doing more home-cooked meals, turning to convenience and easy to prepare meals, and also eating more healthily as well. So when we talk about future food, so it's actually talking about food sustainability and also health and safety. So we're starting to see the change in consumer trends that link to both the environment and health issues. For example, organic, natural foods, clean labeling, locally sourced, and also alternative proteins. So future food, I think it's not a fashion. It's not something that will come and go. It's a trend that will stay here, and it will continually be developed. So we really must use innovation, technology to address our problems today. So with the sustainable food trends, we have environmental packaging. We have the organic and natural foods. We have plant-based and vegan foods. And we also have regenerative agriculture. So consumers are preferring products that mention the benefits of sourcing or the farming methods on the pack. And the regenerative agriculture, that's very important because it's reducing the amount of water used to produce the food, it's preventing land degradation and also deforestation. And it also protects and improves the soil biodiversity as well. And also with the water resources that is also limited. So at Premier, we really emphasize on the health of our society, our people, our consumers, and also the environment. At Premier, we have a brand of coffee called Miwana Coffee. And this Miwana coffee is actually organic, forest-grown coffee that we grow in the northern part of Thailand, and we give a premium price to the coffee farmers that grow this coffee under shade, so under the forest. So that prevents the deforestation. And we also look into giving the farmers a better standard of living as well. So the coffee that we get from this Miwana organic forest is we get coffee beans, roasted coffee beans, and we also turn it into sparkling coffee as well. And these products are readily available here in the Thai market. And it would be really good if we could also export to the foreign market as well, because it's actually a product that really relies on addressing the sustainability point of view. So apart from having the coffee, we also do waste valorization, as Professor Christiani said. We use the coffee sherry, which is the pulp of the coffee fruit, after discarding the green bean. And we use that coffee sherry to make other products, for example, sparkling coffee sherry drinks as well. And this sparkling coffee sherry drink is very healthy because it's very high in antioxidants. And we're also doing clinical trials on blood cholesterol reduction as well. So this organic coffee, it's shade grown, it's certified organic, it's premium quality, and the most important thing is we're supporting the local community and the local farmers. So when people are buying products, you know, you must, as a producer or a manufacturer, you must communicate your sustainable product through your labeling and through your advertising, because consumers nowadays are really looking for this aspect. So you have to convey about the environmental impact, for example, reducing the carbon footprint, recyclable packaging, and also if you're using renewable energy during production as well. And ethical claims are also something that consumers are looking for example, animal welfare, supporting the fair trade, and also, like we are doing, buying from our local farmers. So with the population health, actually, Thailand has already entered in the aging society since year 2005. But in year 2031, we will have 28% of our population with people over the age of 60. And globally, actually, 63% of deaths are from NCDs. 41 million are killed by NCDs each year. In Thailand, 73% of the deaths are from NCDs, and these are from cardiovascular disease, respiratory disease, cancer, diabetics, and other mental conditions as well. So we really have to come up with products for these elderly people so that they have the right nutrition and the right food for them. So future food is not just satisfying your basic needs. It's going to be more specific and also more personalized. So with the healthy living trend, people are eating more of fiber, protein, whole grains, and also functional ingredients. But they're eating less of cholesterol, fat, and also sugar. And actually, we're turning into, you know, back to basics because we're eating more organic and also natural foods as well. So the key focus for developing future food is actually the same delicious food we're having today, but we're using new ingredients and also new technology in order to make that food, and also with sustainable production and also with consumption behavior. So functional foods and ingredients are becoming very popular, and people are turning towards the functional foods and ingredients because these foods are now fortified with additives that can improve your health. For example, improving the immune system, improving the gut health, and also relaxation and sleep, especially, you know, in days when we're working so hard. We just need food that can help with relaxation and also with your sleep as well. And of course, food for beauty and skin is something that's very popular with the ladies. And functional ingredients, so you know, we need functional ingredients, for example, the vitamins for the immune system, probiotics, prebiotics for the digestive system, and also for the brain support. You know, we need the omega-3 and all the vitamins B and E as well. So as Professor was saying, you know, there's sesame, curcumin. Actually, Premier, we formed a JV with a startup here from Chulalongkorn University, and we've formed this joint venture and called the company Premier Innova. And what we do at Premier Innova is that we do nano-encapsulated functional ingredients. and we have like sesamin nanoencapsulation and also curcumin nanoencapsulation, and they have functional properties to improve the blood pressure and the bones and joints for the sesamin, and for the curcumin, it's very good for anti-inflammation, and it's a very good antioxidant as well. And we also, apart from those two ingredients, we also nano encapsulate other local herbal ingredients, because Thailand has so many local herbal ingredients that are so beneficial, and we want to bring those herbal ingredients to the world. So with the emerging consumer trends globally, you know, I think we all know that we want to have healthy diets. We're having personalized foods. We're trying to reduce our waste. We're having healthy snacks. For example, Premier, we're making the fish taro snacks in the picture here, which is very high in protein. It has the omega 369, and it's low in fat. And there's using more technology in manufacturing food, and also people are turning to flexitarians as well. So with the Premier products, the taro fish snacks, as in this picture, it's very nutritional snack, because we believe that we don't want children to be eating snacks that are not healthy. You know, if they're going to eat snacks, they should be healthy snacks, because if they eat the snacks, then they can't eat their main meal. So our snack is very healthy, and we've also come up with a healthier version, because we want to meet the consumer trends, and we've come up with the new one of 30% sodium reduction as well. So there's challenges for the, you know, launching the future food. For example, how do we get people to compromise on the taste and at the same time good for your health? How do we produce healthy food at a cheaper price, like Dr. Christiani said? And how do we alert consumers about sustainability? How do we get widespread adoption so that we get economy of scale, so that we can produce cheaper? And how do we get everyone in the supply chain to keep up with the technology? And also with regulations and FDA approval as well. You know, with the novel foods, it tends to be quite difficult. And also we need to educate the consumers of the benefits of future food. But of course, when there's challenges, there's also opportunities, because then there's opportunities for advancement in technology. There's better and more availability for consumers, and also there's more innovation that's happening within the food industry, and also opportunity for people to have you know, healthier and good well-being. So there's technology to be used in all steps of food production. From raw materials, you can use AI, fingerprint technology, formulations, also AI and machine learning. During production, we can use AI for quality control, warehousing as well, to control the freshness and also efficiency in the warehouse, and also in the supply chain, and also in distribution for products that are temperature sensitive. There's sensors to detect what's going on in the distribution. So I think with the technology that's being developed and being used, we should be able to produce very good quality future food, you know, for the upcoming years. So I'm just going through quite quickly, because I realize that I'm running out of time. So thank you very much, and looking forward to hearing other speakers as well. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Tiranu Songkit. Really appreciate your contextualization of how we're handling many of these trends. on your corporate front and in Thailand. And I think to wrap up, we've had several presentations. Last but certainly not least, before we go into the discussion phase, I'll be handing you over to Mr. Raymond Tham. He's the founder and CEO of Microcell, and I'm sure he'll tell you more about that and expand on his topic of alternative protein challenges and potential solutions. And even as he starts on that, I want to invite the audience to really think of what questions to pose in the questions tab. Questioning is anonymous, but you can always identify your name, give your name, type your name and organization if you like, as you pose your question. And we'll go on to dialogue and these questions after Raymond's presentation. Over to you, Raymond.
Thank you, Luke. And it's great to see so many people on this webinar today. I'm Raymond Tham, and I'm the founder and CEO of Microcell Private Limited. It's a startup company in biomass fermentation here in Singapore and based at A*START Central, which is Singapore's science and technology agency, just like Professor Christiani, but also at Singapore Polytechnic. If I just very quickly share my screen. Before I go into my presentation, I was so glad to hear Professor Christiani talk about valorization. Also very happy to hear Dr. Lalana talking about, the alternative proteins. And today I'll be talking about alternative proteins because that's the space I'm in. But there are challenges. We often talk about alternative proteins as something new, and a lot of companies and institutions present it as a more sustainable form compared to traditional farming. But really, what about sustainable proteins itself? Is it sustainable, right? So alternative proteins itself, is it sustainable? And I think that's the way I'll be approaching this little presentation today. Okay, here we have a simple diagram of sources of alternative proteins. I think a lot of you are very familiar with this. And this here is from our good friends at Good Food Institute. And you can see they are the plant-based, they are the fermentation-based, and the cultivated. In this case, it's cultivated cells, so cultivated meats. But even within plant-based itself, you can see that there's actually a great diversity of sources. You can have your grains and nuts, talking about soy, your walnuts, your seitan. You can also have a traditional biomass fermentation, which is things like your tofu, your tempeh, your gluten, which I think many of us here in Asia are familiar with. There are also what we call process formulated, and some of you may be familiar with brands like Beyond Burger in the US, in which they take plant-based materials and make a burger patty. And also, a bit beyond that, genetically modified soy, in this case, used to produce heme, which gives a reddish liquid color. And that's a technology used by a brand called Impossible Burger, which I think many are familiar with as well. Then there is the other hot topic, right? So there's a cell-based cultivated meats, or CM as we call it. And we have a lot of brands like Meatable, Believer, Upside Food, Eat Just. And however, even within this cell-based cultivated meats, a lot of people may not realize that it's actually a lot of different kinds of cells. So that there are fibroblast cells, which are like the skin cells, the myoblasts, which are the muscle cells, the adipocytes, which are the fat cells, and even cultivated red blood cells. Now, a lot of that's available now is actually in the fibroblast space. And so a lot of research is going in the area of myoblasts, because what we really want to eat is the meat, right? The meat of the chicken, meat of the fish, and that is really in the myoblasts. Then there is the traditional fermentation or fermentation side, in which you have things like cheeses, breads, beer, and yogurt, which we are familiar with. We also have precision fermentation, which was mentioned earlier, and that in the medical side has been used to produce insulin, things like rennet, and also the solar protein, right? In my area, I'm in the area of biomass fermentation, and a more well-known brand is a brand called Quorn, in which they use a fungus called Fusarium, and they basically use it to ferment feedstock such as grain and then produce protein out of that. So I'll introduce a bit more about what my company does in this area a bit later. Yet there are also other forms that are not covered in typical diagrams like these, which includes things like insects, right? So there's a lot of talk now about insects in Thailand. I'd love to go Bangkok, and down the streets you can buy lots of fried insects. But also in the higher end things. Here in Singapore, we have companies like Ultimate Fura Bar. You go to a high-end bar, have your cocktail and your insects together. But there are also insect-based feed. So to feed an animal that we then eat, right? And around this region here, where companies like Protenga Insecta doing black soldier flies. We also forget a lot about the microalgae and seaweed. And I used to do this in Australia, managing the marine biotechnology research. And it can be everything from your kelp to produce alginic acid, which is used as a emulsifier in soups, to your Chlorella spirulina, etc. And I was again glad to hear Professor Christiani talk about valorization, because I think we miss out a lot of that part, that alternative proteins can come from valorized foods. We already eat them, especially in Asia. Things like offals. We eat the organs of animals, the heads, fish head, for example. And we also there is also potential for valorized foods, which are processed, which can be in the form of meat stocks, which are popular here as well to make your soups, and your rennets to make cheese. So what my company does, Microcell, is in the biomass fermentation space. And the reason why we've chosen this is because fungi are nature's network and nature's recyclers. So they can use a wide variety of wheat stock to valorize and make it into a more valuable, nutritious form of food that we can eat. And what we do is to basically isolate the mycelium, the fungi, and produce them. You can see here on the left, this here is a petri dish of mycelium. And this is to make sure that it's natural and pure, to meet regulatory requirements here in Singapore, Singapore Food Agency, to make sure that what we're growing is really what we're selling, right? So we've developed a very wide encompassing cell bank of various species of mushroom, mycelia, and we have more than a dozen species of edible mushroom mycelia. So you can see here, that's what it looks like when it's growing on a petri dish. And what has happened here is that we have allowed a yellow oyster mushroom to grow back again from the petri dish. However, that is not what we're producing. So we're not mushroom farmers. What we actually do is to grow the mycelium in liquid. So you can see on the right here, that's a shake flask in our laboratory, and you can see little spheres of mycelium. So they do not grow the fruiting body, as we call it, which is a reproductive organ of the mushroom. They grow just simply like the body or the roots of the mushroom. And that is actually what we harvest and eat. So on the left here, you can see that's what it looks like when it's harvested. It looks a bit like porridge. And this is then used as in the B2B manner into foods to be processed into as an ingredient into healthy foods. So on the left here is an example of what it's used for. So we have a plant-based burger patty there, and we've actually added mushroom mycelium into it. And you can see, if you look at the insert picture, when you pull the burger patty apart, you can see beautiful muscle-like fibers, right? And that's actually what is often lacking in a lot of these plant-based foods. A lot of them are soy-based, and when you pull it apart, it just looks a bit clayey. So this is what mushroom mycelium can do. And it helps to not just simulate the muscle fiber, but it's also high in essential amino acids and polysaccharides that can reduce gut inflammation. And there are lots of published papers out there, scientific papers that prove this. It's also a very diverse ingredient, and we can use it. In this case here, you can see a protein bar. So both your savory and your confectionery. But I want to come back to this. Really, this is just one source of alternative protein. And I think something that we forget is that it shouldn't exist on its own, but as an ecosystem and as a supply ecosystem. So what you have, for example, you can see the arrows here. If you're growing microalgae or harvesting seaweed, it's actually a source of omega oils and other processing agents for cell-based meats, for your cultured meats. For our mycelium as well, we are, for example, developing scaffolds in which the myoblasts or the muscle cells in cultivated meats can grow on. Also, things like other nutrients that are required for the cultivated meats. There are also, even for insect farming, you can see in the orange arrow here that it can be where you ferment something and feed it to insects. So you're actually controlling the quality of feed that goes to insects, and then obviously the insects that we then eat. A lot of these can be nutrient substrates. So if your grains, your plant-based alternative proteins can be substrates for the fermentation, and vice versa, the fermented products can be ingredients for formulated foods that are plant-based. There are some challenges, and one thing I would like to focus upon is feedstock and resource competition. Many years back, I was doing a project in Australia for where we wanted to upcycle or valorize fish heads. So in Australia, we like to eat the fish fillet, but we don't want the bone. And as a result of that, we don't want the skin either as well. So as a result of that, 40 to 60% of the fish is actually thrown away. So we did a lot of research on that, came up with great products. And by the time that it was actually meant to be commercialized, so what was happening is that the reason why the fish filleting companies were approaching us is because they had to throw it away. And they actually had to pay the council to throw it away. And I think it was something like $250 Australian dollars per ton to throw it away. So they asked us to break it into higher value products to sell. We did all that. But lo and behold, just like myself, being an immigrant back then in Australia, we love to eat fish heads. So what happened was that people started to buy fish heads, and something that was worthless and had to pay to throw away suddenly became $10 a fish head. And so suddenly the source of this alternative protein disappeared. So it was one very good lesson for us that we need to consider feedstock and resource competitions when we talk about these kind of alternative proteins. I won't go into much of the rest. I think the other speakers have talked about consumer habits. We waste a lot of food. But I think there's another aspect I want to end on here is also about food safety triaging and alternatives. So as we develop these kind of alternatives, they are new. A lot of safety regulation goes into them. Singapore Food Agency, for example, has a novel foods guideline in which is very rigorous. You need to go through a lot of safety tests, compositional tests, etc., human trials, etc. However, we may need to have more systems in place such that we do not immediately demonize a form of alternative protein just because somebody eats it and has a tummy ache. We need to perhaps have different levels of responses in which to allow the industry to improve its processes, to improve the product quality and safety. It's already safe, right? So it's already a safe product, but perhaps to improve upon it. And the last thing is I would want to share about is basically to have all these alternatives. Let's not forget about alternatives to these alternatives. We have a lab here in A*STAR, I think Professor Kritian is very familiar with, run by Cargill. And what they do is their research all day long is to find alternatives from wheat from one region to wheat to another region, rice from one place or rice from another place. So it's a lot about these kind of alternatives to make sure that the food supply chain is sustainable and that there's less wastage. So on that, I'll end my little presentation here. Thank you so much, ProPak Asia and Luke, for this opportunity to share. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Raymond, our last but certainly not least speaker. And I think that, through all this sharing, we've really been cooking a dish, you could say, what is the future of food manufacturing that we want? We've talked about taste. We've put in other ingredients like function, wellness, and also nutrition, of course. We've talked about caring for the environment, embracing circularity. We've talked about inclusiveness, including how can poorer people in Asia afford our food? We've talked about variety, novelty. We've talked about resilience as well against different pressures and storms. And of course, as a business, we've talked about what really are the economics involved in making sense and making headway. And I think that, and I suggested to you the broader metaphor or framework of what is advanced food manufacturing, advanced food processing like. So I'm just going to really start a very short dialogue among our panelists and also invite anyone else to pose any more questions. I think June, Chutimas, you can also join in as well, in the interest of time before we close in about 10 minutes. So I see we have one question posed here by one speaker on what are the benefits of sparkling coffee. I guess that is to Dr. Lalana. There's another question that's come up saying, thank you for the insightful trend sharing. And, okay, so it's more a question of whether there'll be a recording. There will be a recording to this, So I think in the short time that we have this question on sparkling coffee for Dr. Lalana. I also just wanted to ask one opening question, to our second speaker, Justin, from Food Industry Asia. You talked about the importance of ESG as a very important trend, even for compliance next time. And you talked about the dangers of greenwashing, So maybe, Justin, could you quickly elaborate on that? And then I'd invite the other speakers also, Prof. Jaya, Dr. Lalana, to share their perspectives. Thank you.
Thanks, Luke, for the question. I think when we talk about the risk of unintentional greenwashing, right, I think it really comes down to an increased commitment towards transparency for any entity which places a claim on a product or packaging itself. I myself, I'm a strong proponent for such claims, but I think it's the awareness to have that increased transparency. Actually, one of the most common questions I get asked by my member companies is, can I actually claim my product to be recyclable in different countries within Asia? And my answer to this question would be to first understand. Do you first understand what the waste management landscape of that particular market is like? Because recyclability is often affected by the market you are in terms of, let's say, space requirements, because recycling requires facilities, right? And is there enough of established collective collection system to facilitate that recyclability process? So I think what I want to highlight here is that, yes, claims is definitely good to showcase to consumers that my product is more sustainable. But it's one thing to claim, and it's also another aspect to ensure that these claims are specific and quantifiable. Having science-based evidence, or at least a third-party certification to back that up, would definitely be helpful. Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Justin. And I think that this answer also builds on another question that we have. What strategies can food manufacturing industries in Asia implement to minimize their environmental impact and promote sustainability across the whole value chain, considering different factors like scarcity, biodiversity, and so on? I don't know whether you want to add on that, but I think some of the points have been made, for instance, about circularity rather than a linear production system. And I think that in the future, one strategy would be even responding to price signals, including from government taxation, over things like carbon credits and scope 1, 2, 3. So if anyone else would want to jump in, if not, I want to maybe pose a question to Prof. J.R. Henry, who spoke 3 powerful points, the last one being, how do we really give more emphasis to affordable quality foods for those from a lower income background in Asia? So that's a call to action. How might different Asian food manufacturers and players answer this call?
Thank you, Luke. So my response to that question is that we need companies to address headlong this misnomer in our structure. At the moment, most of our food companies are only broadly focusing on the apex of the pyramid. So it's products for consumers at large, which have a premium cost. So the point we're trying to make is that there is wealth to be made at the base of the pyramid. It's all about the numbers. There are 3.5 billion people that do not get addressed in terms of a food manufacturing paradigm. So it needs awakening up of the companies in our region. Because to be honest with you, and I'm being quite candid with you, why would a company that's outside our domain want to be sort of proactively benevolent to what we're trying to do? So let's be a renaissance from our region saying, we got to do something that actually is not only going to be wealth creating, but also health creating. And I think it also falls eloquently into our corporate social responsibility. The point I made, it's not only about, being value-based, but rather, in addition to valuation, can we also produce value to our society?
Well, thank you, Prof. And two thoughts to add on that come to mind is one, to look at some success stories in doing that in some of the most populous markets. I can think of India and maybe China as an example. And maybe like in China, the internet economy might have something to do with that. The second thing for me as a social scientist in one of my backgrounds is, again, it comes back to policy action that I personally think will get more significant, as I shared in my intro. If there's more pressure on food security, more food insecurity, then governments will have to act, including shaping the food industry. Maybe let me turn now to Dr. Lalana to ask her to answer the question on benefits of sparkling coffee and maybe share any of her views. And I think lastly, I'll ask Raymond if he has more 2 cents to add as well. Dr. Lalana, please. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Luke. Yeah, so answering your question about sparkling coffee, well, actually just the sparkling coffee, well, it's lower in calories, but what we're talking about is the sparkling coffee sherry. The sparkling coffee sherry is actually low calorie drink, and it's also a good healthy energy boosting drink. It's very refreshing, and because of the coffee sherry, it's high in antioxidants, and therefore it's good for immunity as well, and also the cognitive health. But at the moment, we're doing clinical trials to prove that coffee sherry can actually help reduce the blood cholesterol level. So that clinical trials should be done by the end of this year. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Lalana. Raymond, I wonder whether you have any thoughts to add to the mix from what we've been discussing.
Yes. Certainly very inspired by Professor Christiani's talk about really making food, especially nutritious food, more accessible, and to realize that it's actually a very big market. Everyone, I think, companies tend to want to reach the higher SES, right? The billionaires, they want Elon Musk or somebody to eat their food. But really, that is actually a small market. Yes, the profit margins may be high, but at the same time, I've got friends who run Michelin restaurants, and I think the sounding that's coming out of that is that it's actually quite unprofitable, so because of the high costs. So if we can address the market that actually needs more food and nutrition, but not just address it in terms of, hey, here is more sugar, here is more sweet stuff that will make you feel full, but that is actually nutritious. I think there's a lot of opportunity there, and Asia, with its diversity of agricultural resources and the types of plants and animals that we eat, really we can use that to create the nutrition that is so needed by millions and billions of people. I think that's something that should be explored. It's not just about making money, but really that there is an opportunity to have such diverse resources, and that will actually help companies be more sustainable, right? You're not relying on just one cane sugar supplier, but you've got other sources of sugar, for example. You're not just relying on one chicken supplier, but you've got other sources of proteins to make your nutritious and healthy foods. So
Yes.
that's something I would like to leave you with.
Yes. Well, thank you, Raymond. And I think that that also speaks to the theme of resilience, both at enterprise level as well as overall for regional food security across Asia. I think we just have two final comments. One in terms of waste management, what's the best system? I think we talked about that in terms of the circular economy methods, and I think even just the fundamentals like reducing food loss and waste to begin with. I can invite any other panelists also to answer live, typing the answer there. I think there's a last question. We don't have time for more, sorry, on packaging innovation. So in fact, I think that, of course, that's another aspect of what ProPack Asia is all about. And I think that June later in her closing will have a bit more to share. So just to quickly wrap up, I think we've really covered an appetizer of all the important topics, many of the important topics that we need to think about as food industry players, and that should be profiled in the show in June in Bangkok at ProPack Asia. And so, looking around the whole map of Asia, there's really so much dynamism in the food industry. I mean, just to name a few company examples, the noodle innovations by Monde Nissin from the Philippines, and also Indofood CVP Success Makmur in Indonesia, or experiments in fermentation by Kikuman, or in China, milk company Mengniu looking at online sale innovations to enhance their business, or in Meiji in Japan looking at smart factories, probiotics, and gut health, or diversification, premiumization by the likes of San Miguel in the Philippines, or playing both on tradition as well as new innovation attracting younger customers like Ayam brand in Malaysia, So all across the region, so much vibrant food manufacturing innovation. And I hope this session has shared some of the themes and concerns, the dish, the recipe for the dish that we all need to bake for a preferred future for Asian food manufacturing and Asian food security. So it leaves me to thank all the panelists and to hand us over to June, who will be sharing a bit more information and closing the session. Over to you, June.
Thank you so much, Luke. Before we end the webinar, can we have all the speakers turn on the camera and then we take a pictures together? Raymond? Yes, okay, good. So I will count 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Okay, so thank you very much, all the speakers. So on behalf of Informa Markets, the organizer of ProPack Asia, I would like to once again thank you all speakers for the great presentation. It was a pleasure to have you with us, and thank you to everyone for participating in today's webinar. So just a quick reminder that your certificate of participation will be sent out within 5 working days after you have completed the webinar survey. So please, and also please stay tuned with us for more webinar series on 9th of April for packaging industry and 30th of April for beverage industry update. Yeah, and last but not least, I would like to invite everyone to join the ProPack Asia 2024, the premium Processing and Packaging Exhibition for Asia. ProPack Asia is the regional's #1 international trade event for products, solution, and technology on processing and packaging, which is covering vertical markets such food and beverage industry, personal care and cosmetics, pharmaceutical, FMCG, and agriculture. The event will be held on 12th till 15th of June 2024 at Bangkok International Trade and Exhibition Center, or we call Bytech Bang Na, in Bangkok, Thailand. The pre-registration is now open. You can simply scan the QR code on the screen. And also additionally, we offer a we offer a hosted buyer program for any companies who interested . I'm sorry. Is there anyone sharing the screen right now? Yeah, okay. So, all right, sorry. Okay, so also we offer a hosted buyer program for any company who interested in attending ProPack Asia as a group or individual, whether you're based overseas or locally in Thailand. So if you're interested, so please don't hesitate to contact me. My email will be provided in the chat box. So we are hoping to see you there. And thank you all speakers, and thank you everyone to join. Enjoy the rest of your day. Bye bye.